Crenshaw. Sheriff Demings.
Thank you, Captain Nieves, and thank you for being here. There's been quite a bit going on since our initial briefing this morning, and we wanted to come back this afternoon and give you as much information as we possibly can at this time. The detectives and our crime scene investigators have been interviewing witnesses and reviewing the crime scene itself. In addition, they have been working with the medical examiner on identifying the victims involved in this situation. I want to remind you that in shootings that involve multiple victims, about 75% of the time the incident is over within 5 minutes or less. In the remaining number, about 50% or half of the time the shooting incidents are over within 2 minutes. The response time for Orange County Deputy Sheriffs once dispatched was a little over 2 minutes in this case, and so everything went fairly quickly. What I'm going to do at this time is identify the victims in this case. However, because of this extensive crime scene that we're processing, I will not be able to identify all 5 of the victims in this case. They're still working to positively identify 2 of them. But the 3 victims that I am going to identify, again, our hearts and our prayers go out to the families of these victims. Those families have already been notified. We've been working through the reunification process as this event has unfolded today. The first individual that I will identify as a victim in this case is Robert Snyder, S-N-Y-D-E-R, a white male. His birth date is April 27th of 1948. The second victim that I will identify is a woman, Brenda, I'm going to spell her last name, Montanez, M-O-T-A-N-E-Z, hyphenated, Crespo, C-R-E-S-P-O, white female, birth date of 5/23 of 73. And the third victim in this case is Kevin Clark, white male, July 28th of 1963. The victims in this case range in age from their early 30s to 65 years old. As soon as we are able to identify the 2 remaining victims, we will release that information to you. The subject in this case has been identified as John Robert Newman, and he spells his last name N-E-U-M-A-N-N, John Robert Newman, Jr., date of birth May 20th, 1972. All of the indications that we have at this time, this individual lives alone, has no family here in the area. We are trying to understand as much about him as we possibly can. What I can tell you is that our records indicate that he is a veteran of the U.S. Army, discharged honorably back in 1999. We're trying to understand other issues about him as this investigation moves forward. Also want to recognize Full Sail University. They have been working with our staff, our grief counselors, our chaplains, and our victims advocates this morning, working with the families as we are trying to reunify them with loved ones. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for any questions that you may have.
Sheriff, was there any sort of interaction between the suspect and deputies when you guys first arrived on scene, or was he already deceased by the time deputies arrived?
All indications are from eyewitness testimony that it appears that just before the deputies entered to the scene itself as an active shooter scene, that the subject likely killed himself or shot himself at that point. There's different things about the crime scene that leads us to that belief at this point.
Sure. Does there seem to be a specific target was he just going about shooting people at random inside this business?
In terms of his total motive for shooting the specific individuals involved, we have information that at least one of them he had a negative relationship with, but he was certainly singling out the individuals that he shot. It appears that one of the individuals he encountered, a young woman who was a temporary employee, had just shown up for work, that he pointed a firearm at her and told her to get out of the business. There are also indications that the subject reloaded his firearm at least once during the shooting spree this morning.
What kind of firearm did he have? Is there an internal video system that you've been able to review and collect what happened?
The subject had a handgun. Again, it's being processed there at the scene. He also had a fairly large hunting knife on his person and may have had a couple of other smaller knives as well. We are processing the crime scene at this point. The gun had not been moved. Once the medical examiner goes through their process, then we will certainly do a firearms trace on the weapon involved, and hence is why we are working with ATF, who are standing here with us this afternoon.
So, Sheriff, do we
Video?
understand then
Is there
that
video?
he was picking people out? The 7 people who survived, were they even in the vicinity of people who were being killed? Were they in a separate part of the building?
It appears that there were a total of 8 witnesses now. One of them may not have been an employee, but some type of vendor that was on site. We do not have video from inside the business other than body-worn camera footage that the deputies were wearing. But it appears that there was an external camera system, and we are, again, trying to access that information.
Sheriff, do we know his way in?
He had worked there for a number of years, and based on the evidence that we see at the scene, we believe we're able to put him in a particular location where he entered the business and likely killed the first victim.
The front door, or was it a side door?
It's a rear door. The north side of the building is where we believe.
Sheriff, do we know exactly the people that he targeted? Did he say anything to them? Are any of the witnesses, the other 8 employees who survived, are they saying he said anything to any of them?
Again, one of the surviving witnesses / victim says that he specifically spoke to her and pointed the gun at her and told her to get out of there. He didn't know her apparently because, again, she's a temporary employee, and this may have been the first day that she had come back to work. This subject was fired from the business back in April and had not interacted with this particular woman.
Do you know why he was fired?
That's issues internal to the business and the nature of the business that I won't get into at this point.
Is there any indication that he had previously been reported for problems at work? And have you looked through your paperwork at the Sheriff's Department to see if there's any signs of his name, photographs of arrest, former problems at work where he was threatening employees?
One of the things that we mentioned during the press conference this morning was going back to 2014. There had been a call to the business in which he was listed as a suspect, a battery on another employee. Once the deputies got there and interviewed both parties involved, there was no arrest made at that time. So that goes back to, I believe, June of 2014. He continued to work there at the business until just April of 2017.
Were one of those 2 people involved in the victim today?
Again, we're still identifying victims, so I can't answer that question right now.
Have you checked his social?
What type of handgun was it, and did he have a license for the handgun?
To the best of our knowledge, he did not have a concealed weapons permit, and it's a handgun. We have not been able to precisely identify the caliber of the weapon. Is still in the crime scene as they're processing it. Again, it's a fairly extensive scene because of the number of bodies and shootings
Would you
involved.
describe it as a revolver revolver or a semi-automatic?
It's a semi-automatic pistol.
Any indication as to why today he would go in there if he was fired back in April?
We don't know why he chose today.
Are you
Sure.
guys looking into a legal review from 3 weeks ago posted to the business that said there would be identified?
One of the processes that we go through is we will data mine the social media and other posts that may have occurred to see if there's anything instructive about this individual from the past. That's all part of the investigative efforts going forward.
Sheriff, you've mentioned a couple of times it was an extensive scene. Does this mean that he was going through the building, shooting people in different locations?
It's a fairly large interior of the business, described to me probably the length of 2 or 3 football fields all over. So it's a fairly large area inside, and at least one of the victims was found in a different location from the others, and don't know if she had run into that area trying to hide or what.
Sheriff, can you talk a little bit about the positions of these 3 employees that you were able, the victims that you were able to identify? Can you talk about what their roles were at? Were they managers? Were they higher-ups in the business? Can you talk about what role they played?
I can't tell you precisely what their role was in the business. At least one was described as something like a sales manager, but the others were co-workers.
What did he do for business? Like, what was his role?
I can't tell you specifically what he did for the business.
How close were those victims found, their bodies,
The
to one another?
The bodies were some distance away, but again, most were within a fairly large area.
You've got officers that are still going through the scene, but does it appear that he went up and shot people in the face, in the chest, back of the head, a variety of that? How did he go about this, based on the decisions of the bodies and the entryways?
I don't want to make it too gruesome, but most of the victims were shot in the head. Some were shot multiple times.
How many
And there was a question in the back.
Sure. Do you know if he was part of the 2014 lawsuit? Was he part of that?
I couldn't comment about the status of any lawsuits of the business.
How many 911 calls came in?
There were multiple 911 calls. I'm not certain that I've heard just how many, because what happened, some of the surviving witnesses were dialing others who were dialing us, and sometimes it were multiple people on one call. So we're going through that process to understand all of that.
He's the only suspect at this point? You don't believe he's cooperating with anybody else?
At this point, it appears that he was a lone gunman, and that there were no others involved in this plot.
So do you think that the 911 calls, if the investigation is complete, would be made public today?
I can't tell you if we'll make the 911 calls available today. Obviously, in some cases, we will have to redact certain information, and that just takes time. But we'll be transparent and get a release of the 911 calls or the tapes as soon as we possibly can.
A quick response to possibly having saved everyone else's lives in the building?
At some point, what we did here was that, and I'm not sure, we're trying to track it down, that one of the survivors may have heard a siren or something in the background, and shortly thereafter the subject shot and killed himself. What we do know was that as soon as our deputy sheriffs arrived on scene, because of their active shooter drills, they very quickly assembled a team of deputy sheriffs, and they immediately went into the building.
Sheriff, is there any indication that he had been planning this for some time? If this was just, I'm going to wake up and do this, is there any indication yet that this had been thought out over a time?
In situations like this, my experience tells me that this individual had made deliberate thought to do what he did today. He had a plan of action, and he executed his plan today. And just as I was standing here, we received, sadly, the name of one additional victim who has been identified, and that victim is Jeffrey Roberts, white male, date of birth January 27th, 1960. So we have one remaining victim to be identified. So as you can see, they're working as we speak to try to make sure that this takes place as quickly as possible.
And of those four, were any of those four involved in the incident from 2014 in the complaint?
Again, I don't have any indication that one of the four that have been identified at this point were involved.
So your social media team has gone through, I guess, some of the stuff. Have you found anything on social media, claims of why he would do this, any motives of anything? Has he said anything on what you've discovered in social media?
Again, that's all part of the criminal investigation. They're just going through bits of information. At this point, I can't say definitively if there's anything in social media that indicates that this individual was going to act today, and had someone known anything about it, it could have stopped it. What we always say to people, however, is that when you see individuals who are engaged in suspicious behavior by either their actions, the physical actions, or the verbal actions when they're posting in social media, other things that indicates that this person is potentially a dangerous or violent person, we always say to our public, notify your law enforcement authorities, let us deal with it. At least we have the opportunity to intercede at that moment.
How many deputies went in initially?
3 deputies.
Sheriff, have you been to his house? Have been to Newman's house and been able to go through the stuff, and he left any suicide notes or any
Our detectives are working with another jurisdiction on writing a search warrant to search the home where we believe he lived.
Where is that?
And I'm not going to identify it at this moment, but that's a process that will move forward.
Did he travel from out of town to get here, or was he, here in Orange County?
He was here in this immediate area.
Sheriff, this comes, a few days before the Pulse commemoration. Obviously, it's not connected whatsoever. It's not terrorist related, but it must be frustrating to have another violent, not mass casualty, but lots of people dead from another shooting. Is it frustrating for you?
Well, it's certainly frustrating for all of us, I believe, whenever any community has to deal with violence. But I say that we're all responsible for individual actions, but we collectively as a community can work to, we hear said all the time, if you see anything suspicious, say something. Say something to someone in an official capacity. That's the only way that we have a fighting chance to stop some of this from happening.
And because of Pulse, because of what you did learn from responding there, did that help in any manner with this situation this morning?
I think any time that in life you gain experience of responding to a crisis, the next time you respond to a crisis, it makes you better at your overall response. And so there's some benefit that our training and our experience, there's no substitute for either, helps us to better respond quickly to these types of incidents.
Is there anything specifically that how you guys responded at Pulse specifically that you used here?
As a law enforcement officer, I can tell you that every one of our deputy sheriffs or police officers here thinks through their minds when one of these tragedies happens. If I'm put in a situation, what will I do? How will I respond? How will I react? And we at the Orange County Sheriff's Office have tried to ensure, since many of these incidents, that our training is consistent with best practices. And I believe that the response today is indicative of that. Once we get on scene, there are certain things that happen, and I got to tell you, I'm proud of the deputies that got there. While there's no indication that there were any shots fired once they got there, they did not hesitate. They knew that a subject had been reported to have been involved in an active shooting situation. There was no hesitation on their part. As soon as they could get there and assemble a team of deputy sheriffs, they went inside that building, sometimes willing to risk their own peril in that process. Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Okay.
You just have a photo
A photo
of the shooter?
We'll provide you whatever information we can as the next few hours unfold and everything. There is some, we're looking into the background, as the sheriff stated, regarding the report that was done in 2014. Just go ahead and what we'll do is we'll provide and push that information out, as well as a photo, if that is available, of him at the time, if we have any photo. And again, we'll provide you additional updates from our office as the future hours unfold, if there's anything additional that we can provide in regards to the last victim as well.
The name of the last victim just came in, and
Official update.
so we'll go ahead and release that at this point. Modern technology.
One of the victims is Hispanic.
Okay, the fifth victim, who is deceased, is Kevin Lawson, white male, date of birth 9/15 of 1970, September the 15th, 1970.
Sheriff, real quick, the Clark victim, could you spell that name? We're going to get the way to spell Clark.
CLARK.
And then could you spell Newman's last name again one more time?
NEUMANN, Junior.
Perfect, thank you,
Okay.
Sheriff.
Do you
Thank you,
think
Sheriff.
hold another presser?
What we will do is provide you additional information, as I was stating, as additional hours unfold. You do have the information regarding the shooter and the 5 victims at this point. And if we have anything additional that we can provide that's going to be useful and everything, we will do so. Again, we want to make sure that the community has all the information that they can, but we also want to protect the integrity of the investigation. So we'll do that in the unfolding hours. Thank you very much.
Angelo, Telemundo wondered if you could do anything in Spanish.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I can.
From here?
That's,
Great, that'd be
You
great.
can do it right from there, it's easier for her.
okay. All right.
Thank you.
Hey, Joe.
The only thing, I don't have all the names with me.
Okay, don't worry about the names.
I don't know. I haven't seen a photo of them.